Hello and welcome, this is Red Vitus, and today I'll be repairing a Rockford Pocket Watch. This watch came to me in non-working condition. It's probably not been working for decades, so I'll have a look at it and see if I can find out what the problems are. First thing I do is remove the hands. And with those removed, next I'll decase the watch. Checking how the balance spins. And I've identified my first issue now. Now to remove the dial and seconds hand, there are 3 screws on the side, the dial screws. And I'll loosen them, but not remove them. Now as I lift off the dial, it takes the seconds hand with it. The major difference with these hunter case movements is in the position of the winding pinion. It's located at 3 o'clock instead of at 12 o'clock, such as in open-faced watches. The other difference is cosmetic. These movements use a hunter case, which is covered on both sides, and in the case of this watch, there was an issue with the hunter case that the front lid would not stay closed. And that's an issue that I'll repair later. Right now I'm removing the balance cock, pushing out the hairspring stud, and carefully removing the balance. So a lot of what's wrong with this watch is just it's overdue for cleaning. See, there's no power getting to the pallet fork. And now we can see a second issue with this watch. The upper pivot is bent. And so while this watch might run, it's not going to keep good time. So that'll have to be addressed. Now before I do any other work, I'll unwind the mainspring. This is the winding pinion and the barrel. Now back to the other side of the watch, I'm removing the cannon pinion and the setting wheel. Now this is the set lever spring. And the setting lever. That's the yoke spring. And the yoke with a left-handed screw. and the associated gears below the yoke, which are used for both setting and winding the watch. Here you can see the rest of the gear train with the escape wheel, the fourth wheel, the third wheel, and the center wheel. The pallet fork had fallen off through a hole in the plate before I removed the cover. Now this plate here is pretty corroded. It's chewed up so much, and from the looks of it, it had been refinished before. We do see a lot of rust and maybe old oil in this area, so this watch is going to need a really good cleaning, and that should remove all that dirt. This is the ratchet wheel. So now I'm going to begin the repairs with the watch disassembled. To remove this case spring, there's a pin that I managed to take out, and try and remove this catch spring. This spring that I'm removing is what causes the lid to stay closed, and it's just not the right size spring. So I'm going to attempt to remove this spring. There it goes. And find one that fits the case properly. Now, I don't know if there's a formula to do this, but usually we have to find out what the problem is and then go through a box of extra case springs, and hopefully we have one that fits the watch better. And in this case, I did identify one that did fit it better. So I'll go ahead and install that spring next. And I'll use this tool, which is a case spring plier, to aid in the installation. And to that tool, I make a modification, which, for me at least, makes it a little easier to use. I added a rubber band, and that makes this a spring-loaded tool of sorts. Here I'm placing the new case spring into the case, just working it in. And now to repin that spring, I make use of the tool, which spreads the spring and lets me push that pin the rest of the way. And that completes the repair. Now I just have to test it. So I'll check that the crown presses in without deflection, and it looks good. Then I'll close the lid next and make sure it remains closed. All right, this is the most important step, and some light finger pressure does not open the lid, so that looks good. So that repair is complete. This next repair I'm doing, well, it's not really a repair. I'm replacing the mainspring since the old one was set, and I have a new alloy spring, which should give this watch many years of trouble-free work or trouble-free operation. So pressing that spring in with a mainspring winder and placing the arbor into the coil, and then attach the lid. Now here I'm removing the hairspring in preparation to repair the balance staff. So I gently pry it off and take out my staking set to punch out the roller table. Light taps with a hammer is all it needs. And now the balance is ready to be repaired, or the balance staff. So I decided here, instead of to restaff the balance, to see if I could straighten that pivot. And I'm going to put the staff into a lathe collet, and with a hefty set of pliers, try and work that pivot straight. Some improvement there, and I'll continue until that pivot is absolutely true. And after a few minor adjustments, I think it's ready. So I'll test the pivots next. And looking at the after compared to the before, there's no longer any deflection in the pivot when I rotate the balance. So I'll rotate this balance a couple times, and you'll see that it looks like, at least to this magnification, that pivot should be good to use. Now I'm reattaching the roller table and hairspring. And this balance is ready for a trial. If you remember earlier in this video, when I was testing the balance, it only really rotated in one direction. And that can be caused by, it's an issue with the escapement. And in this case, the safety pin was bent backwards. This should be perpendicular to the pallet fork. Now I do that repair with an anvil. And with the back of my tweezers, I'll push the pallet fork back into the anvil, into that hole in the anvil, and with gentle pressure only, that should straighten out that safety pin. Now it's perpendicular, and I'll give everything a good cleaning. Clean up the jewels, and this watch should be ready to reassemble. So I'll begin with some of the setting gears. This is the setting lever. Now the set lever spring, which is not screwed down into the plate, it fits or sits on top of a screw. So I hold it down just to make sure everything's okay and pop it into place. then give it a test. Looks good. Next comes the yoke with the associated winding and setting gears. Sometimes they fall off. Some oil helps, but in this case, a couple fell off. Now I'm reinserting the yoke screw. I showed some oiling. I don't show all the oiling steps. And the spring. So this spring, the screw does hold it down. So I'll place the spring, or sorry, the screw, give it a few turns, but not tighten it down all the way. Then with a pair of tweezers, position the spring into the notch and finish tightening the screw. Testing that it works correctly. That looks good. One more gear to place, and then I will change gears, so to speak, and begin assembling the gear train. This is the pallet fork going into the top plate, which is upside down. And the escape wheel. None of these parts are oiled at this point. I do all the oiling usually towards the end, but before I install the balance. Now the third wheel and the center wheel. I like the arrangement of gears in this Rockford watch. So next I'll connect the two plates, and I have to align the 5 pivots with the respective jewels. So lowering that pillar plate onto the pivots that extend out. You have the center pivot and the 4th wheel pivot, which are the easiest to locate. Now with the plate down, I have 3 of the pivots in. I still have to find the escape wheel pivots. It probably would have helped if I had my tweezers out, but that's no big deal. So when I get my tweezers, I'll nudge those last 2 gears into place. Now, I don't put any pressure on the plates. I just simply hold them together and work the pivots into their jewels. With these 17 jewel watches, it's pretty easy to tell when they're there because the ends of the pivots are polished and they're easily seen. Okay, they're not in yet. Okay, the plates came together, and I think the pivots are in. I'll just confirm it with a flashlight, and it looks good. So I'll fasten the 2 plates together. This bridge has 2 screws. Now I test that the pallet fork swings back and forth with a little bit of pressure on the center wheel, and it does. Confirming that tells me that all the pivots are in the jewels, and I can tighten down the screws all the way. This barrel bridge was missing a screw when I received a watch, but I found that it actually had the screw but was being used on the balance cock, and I had a replacement screw for this Rockford balance, so wasn't a big issue. So next I need to install the rest of the winding gears. This is the ratchet wheel and the click. Both have been cleaned. And this plate I ended up replacing. The old one was just too thin, and with so much corrosion, it couldn't be reused. So this came from a donor movement, but it's an identical part. And now it's ready to place the balance. And happily, it takes off running right away. And some good motion once the balance screw is tightened down. So this watch is just about ready, and there are a few more gears to install. This, however, is a dial washer, which was not in the watch when I received it, but I have a whole box of them. Now with the dial installed and the watch case, this watch is running. Let's put it into the timer and see how well it runs. Here's the dial up position, and this was done with the watch running for about 12 hours. So good amplitude and running in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 seconds fast. Now in the pendant up position, running well. And this watch is complete. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into my channel. This is Red Vitus, and I'll be back with more videos.